before.
Oh, the health one. I turn my camera off.
7:30
I still turn the camera off.
Too bad anyone else.
They
We're all
just talk.
talking with good parents there.
No way.
Okay, nothing like what you want to talk about.
On for 20 minutes. That's why I shut
Do you want me
my
to
camera.
sit?
I was up
Do
to
you want me to sit like back there? So you
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Would everybody please rise and join us for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining us. This is our fourth scheduled budget workshop out of 4. So tonight is the last one. We do have some new developments that we will go through in terms of state aid. And in the end, we'll make some decisions. And the next step will be to adopt the budget. Then we will have a public budget hearing, as well as a series of presentations for the PTAs and so forth. And then lastly, of course, we will have the budget vote. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mrs. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Geller. So we have Mr. Weber here this evening taping the presentation, which will be posted on the district website tomorrow, in addition to the PowerPoint presentation. So as Mr. Geller mentioned, this is the last in a series of work sessions to craft the 2021-2022 school year budget. Tonight, Mrs. Pilati, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, will provide a review of the status of the proposed budget, and we will answer any questions that you may have. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Pilati.
Thank you, Mrs. Burns. Good evening. Okay. The 2021 enacted budget was, the 2021 enacted state budget was released on April 6, 2021. State aid to New York Public Schools will increase $3.06 billion over next year. The state budget will increase total foundation aid by $1.4 billion for next year and includes a plan to fully fund the formula over a 3-year phase-in. Fortunately, West Islip is fully funded in foundation aid, so our projected increase for foundation aid is only the minimum of 2%. Overall, West Islip will receive 8.91% more in state aid as compared to what was budgeted in the prior year. The enacted budget rejected the executive proposal to consolidate 11 aid categories into a new services aid. This was a win for school districts, as this consolidation would have reduced total funding by 17% and was to be offset by federal aid. The budget also rejected the executive proposal to impose a local district funding adjustment, which would reduce STAR reimbursements to school districts. This proposal would have cut approximately $1.4 billion to funding of public schools and was also going to be offset by federal aid. Another state budget item that doesn't necessarily impact school districts, but is worth mentioning, is a new income-dependent property tax relief credit for homeowners. This credit would be available to any property owner who receives STAR and earns $250,000 or less. It will be totally phased out for anyone earning greater than $250,000. The enacted budget provides some relief for districts regarding transportation expenses. The state will provide transportation aid for the delivery of supplies, meals, instructional materials, internet access, all of that which was provided to students during the 2019-20 school year using school transportation. However, they are also going to provide aid for the transportation-related standby costs, which many districts incurred from March 16, 2020 through May 7, 2020, at which time the executive order was given to close schools to in-person learning for the remainder of the school year. The enacted budget continues the elimination of the state's 18.24% share of reimbursement for CSE placements in residential schools. This was proposed last year and it passed. The proposal this year was to make this shift permanent. While that did not happen, the state did extend this shift for yet another year. So for the second year in a row, districts will now have to pay 56.8% of those maintenance costs rather than the 38.24% which we used to pay.
So you do
permanent then, if they decline to draw back on that?
It looks like they just keep, this is the second year they're extending it, so it looks like it's headed that way, but there hasn't been any other further word on it.
Will we need to do any retro on that, or?
No, we haven't increased our budget accordingly, because last year was the first year we increased our budget for those placement costs, the residential, and we continued that cost this year because it was
So
unknown.
you increased the cost, but we haven't had to pay it yet?
We have, this current school year is the first year we're paying, we need 56% rather than 38.
Okay.
What's the general total dollar amount? I mean, is it a big number?
I have to look, we don't have many residential placements, I would say it's less than 300,000, but I'm not sure of the total amount, and that's just total residential cost, that's not the share of the maintenance costs.
Okay.
The enacted budget includes approximately $12 billion in allocated federal stimulus funding for school districts. This funding consists of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Appropriations Act, or CRRSA, and the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP. District-specific allocations of these funds are driven by the Title I formula and student counts. This funding is a one-time allocation with an allowable use over several years. We are awaiting further guidance from the state for the use of these funds, and as per the state aid run, West Islip has been allocated approximately $3.7 million from CRRSA and $1.5 million from ARP. However, these funds are accounted for in the special aid fund and not the general fund. So it's similar to a grant, so these monies will not be included in our budget that you see here tonight.
And so you just don't know how you're to spend it?
Correct. There's some guidance out there, but more detailed guidance is expected by the end of the month because we have requirements supposedly that we have to fill by July 1st.
So we'll have 3 years to spend them on what undoubtedly will be non-recurring.
Exactly.
expenses.
As they stressed, it's to supplement, it's not to supplant anything, so it is all one time. Some people were even discussing, we've had calls this week about different types of capital work. There's learning loss, there's extracurricular, there's various types of items that were discussed, but again, further guidance is forthcoming because we do have,
So things like infrastructure, which we've heard a lot about, technology building, boosting, things that we had to forego or neglected, or we realized that we needed as a result of the coronavirus and the education that we tried to provide. Yes?
I believe
Is
so.
that fair to say?
Yes.
It has to support certain, those categories that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So it needs to support them in some way, shape, or form. The CTE programs, other things that over the last few years we've seen have been of interest to the state. So one time, as Mrs. Pilati points out, one-time purchases to support any of those types of programs, but a big part of it is to prevent learning loss, and some of it needs to go toward summer support for students who may have had learning loss over the last year and a half.
Okay.
The enacted budget also includes an additional $105 million for the expansion of universal pre-kindergarten. This aid will also be accounted for in the special aid fund and will therefore not be included in our general fund, which again would not be included in the budget you see here tonight. West Islip would be eligible for approximately $340,000 in UPK funding if we operated a full-day UPK program. Currently, the district operates a pre-kindergarten program that consists of 2 half-day programs. The program we currently run costs approximately $500,000. The expansion of a full UPK program would cost an additional $400,000 because we would not just look to replace the program we have now with just the approved 63 slots. We would look to expand the program to be inclusive of all the students that are interested in attending. So,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
okay, so the additional $400,000 would truly only cost the district approximately $60,000 because if we're eligible for $340,000 in aid, the difference that the general fund would have to subsidize would only be $60,000.
And we believe that that is an annual funding.
Correct.
And then, I heard today, I'm sorry, I don't know, the state has made a commitment, once the federal funding is over, the state has made a commitment, as good as that is, to support the districts that buy into this, if you will, at this time.
Okay, thank you.
And again,
So if districts say no to this, the chances are you're not getting it back. If you say no now.
They haven't come out and said that, but we know what happened last time.
right, and this hasn't been offered in many years.
Which is what happened last time. If you couldn't pick up the tab and do it last time, you were out for your pre-K Monday.
And again, we are awaiting further guidance on this, and we are in the process of evaluating the program.
So this would be, we would only have a full-day program, or would we have both?
Correct, we would have a full universal pre-K program that we would receive partial funding for, which is the $340,000, but the district would subsidize the difference.
So no half-day?
We don't know.
Yeah.
One of the things we're talking about is possibly, we have many registrants already, possibly polling the parents and getting a sense of what their preferences are. Maybe there would be no need to run half-day, maybe people outright don't want the full day, and it's a full-day expansion, so a half-day is not going to be
So
funded by the
the
state.
spots that the state is offering must be full day.
Yes.
So you must get 66 committed full, is it 66?
63.
63 committed full-day students in order to accept the grant money from the state. And the balance of that, if the district wanted to continue funding that full-day program, we would be taking an extra $60,000 on top of the 5 we were allocate for the half-day program to make it full-day for everybody.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Or potentially run a full-day program and then investigate whether there is any value in running a half-day
There's some people
program.
who might want it.
Concurrent to that.
But I think the big thing in my mind anyway is that there would be full-day pre-K available to all of our
Anyone that wishes to take it.
families.
And by full day, we're talking about 5-hour day?
We haven't gotten that far in the process.
So the half-day program from the state is a 2.5-hour program. And the full day, if you look at the scheduling and that they outline on the state website for universal pre-K is a 5-hour day. So I just want to delineate that it's a little bit different than a full day in terms of a K-5
It's not 9 to
day.
3.
It's a little bit shorter than that 6-hour day.
These are the latest projected average class sizes for 21-22.
And in the back of your packet, you will have it broken out.
Yeah, I have some questions.
We monitor these numbers very closely throughout the spring and summer, as there have been and will continue to be adjustments based on CPSE and CSE placements and the whole process.
So, I just want to stop here.
Sure.
These class sizes are probably the lowest consistently that we've ever been able to see or get. You know, in the years past, we've had one grade level or another pushing 24, 25, which really seems high as opposed to a 17, 18 class. So, very consistent. Can you tell me what the number for the current graduating class is right now?
333.
We're graduating this year, 333 students.
Yes.
That's like a reduction of 50 from last year.
Yep, about 40 and change, yes.
Yeah, we're losing every single year. But there's just a reason why I wanted to highlight that. It's just the huge difference we see in these cohorts here, which we'll be faced with in
Going
that.
forward. So I did receive the longevity study, today's Tuesday, I guess it was Friday afternoon. I haven't even looked at it. It's going in your packets on Friday as an electronic attachment. So I don't know what it says.
Okay.
Short of it says longevity study on
Longevity 10 years out they gave you?
So it's 10 years through 2030, 31 school year, correct?
Well, that should be
So I'm sure that'll be good reading.
That should be fascinating.
I'm sorry.
Okay. There are 3 main sources of revenue for school districts. Property taxes, of course, is the primary source of local revenue. The amount of taxes that we levy is subject to a tax cap. State aid is the second major source of revenue for districts, and it's either formula-driven, such as foundation aid, or it could be expense-driven, such as transportation aid or BOCES aid. Our local revenues are the third source of revenue for school districts. Some examples could include interest, non-resident tuition, a pilot payment, and for anyone who's not familiar, a payment in lieu of taxes where a commercial property owner would enter into an agreement for a negotiated period of time to make annual payments instead of paying property taxes. This is our funding profile here in West Islip. As you can see, we have approximately 70% coming from property taxes, about 27% almost coming from state aid, 2.66% comes from those other revenue sources, and just 1.1% is in fund balance. Sure.
Does that state aid part, is that not figuring on the recent additional state aid? Or is that included in that part?
That includes the current projected budget for next year. So that does not include the federal money that I had spoken of, or the UPK, because that number is not included in our state aid budget. Those could be treated like grants almost. They're going to be the special aid fund. So it does include our projected 21-22 state aid.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay. This is our budget formula. Since the tax cap was enacted, this is the way school districts have to calculate their expenditure budget. They all start first calculating a restricted tax levy. Of course, then we have to add in any projected state aid we expect to receive and any local revenues that we anticipate earning and any use of reserves or appropriated fund balance. And what you're left with, the result, is your expenditure budget for the following year. So we'll go through each component of this formula. The allowable tax levy limit is based on the multi-step formula provided by the Office of the State Comptroller. And that calculation led us to a tax levy of $88,619,244, which is an increase of 1.6% over the prior year. We are within our allowable levy. And we went over this formula in detail during our first budget workshop. This restricted levy was submitted to the Office of the State Comptroller on February 25th. In order to calculate the actual tax rate for next year, we would need three numbers. You need the tax levy, you need your final assessment values, as well as your homestead percentages. The school, however, only provides one of those numbers, which is the tax levy. The final assessment value and the homestead percentages come from the town of Islip, which we do not receive until the fall. So, however, since everyone is always interested in knowing how the levy increase will affect them personally, we like to provide an estimated average increase. So based on an average assessed home in West Islip of $45,000 and using our prior year assessed values and percentages, the tax increase over the prior year is $139.57, or a 1.6% increase. This translates to an increase of about $11.63 per month. The district also provides instructions on how to calculate your own property tax increase in our budget newsletter that we provide and mail out to all district residents. Here's a summary of our state aid as budgeted for 21-22 compared to what we budgeted this current year in 2020-21. As you can see here, the budgeted foundation aid last year was reduced significantly by 10%, or about $2.4 million, as we were preparing for the state's anticipated reduction to state aid, which never came to fruition. So the reason why there's such a large increase here of 13% in state aid is because the district deliberately took down the foundation aid last year. We budgeted 10% less in foundation aid because of that anticipated large reduction we were thinking the state was going to provide. Luckily, that never happened. And you can see the other changes here relate to expense-based aid, such as BOCES. Those are all results of the expenses that we incur in the prior year. We also had last year the inclusion of a pandemic adjustment and the offsetting federal CARES restoration. So last year was a little different, where the CARES money, that first federal push of money, was included in the general fund. However, this year, you notice that CRSA and the ARP money, as well as the UPK money, that's not shown here because, again, those are going to be shown in our special aid revenue. It's treated more like a grant. It's a reimbursement aid.
So that's not something that gets voted on, per se, by
That's
the public, right? So
Correct. It doesn't get
It's not
included.
affected by a yes or no, up or down.
That's
vote.
correct. Yep. So overall, you can see our state aid is increasing approximately 8.9% over what we budgeted in the prior year. The district's other revenue sources are listed here. You can see our pilot payment for that one property we have in West Islip is increasing about $10,000. We also have rental income that's projected to decrease about $77,000 for next year as a result of renegotiating some of our leases and the related space some of our tenants are renting. Our interest income is projected to decrease based on the current state of the economy. Our library bond issue is decreasing due to the fact that this is the last year of the library bonds.
Woo-hoo.
Yes.
Way to go.
Our other miscellaneous income is increasing significantly, about $125,000. That's related to various items, such as the summer rec program last year. We did not run that due to COVID-19. However, we are anticipating running that this summer. The increase also relates to an increase in the estimated amount of our BOCES refund we receive every year, as well as our CPSE reimbursements. So overall, we're looking at a projected decrease of other revenue of 5.3%.
So in that miscellaneous income,
Sure.
the assumptions we're going to make is that we're going to be able to rent out the auditoriums again, all of that. Is that in there? Is that part of that miscellaneous?
Yes, I held flat. I basically held flat from 2 years ago because last year wasn't a good judge
Right.
of the income that we would have received because we weren't renting. So I tried to just be conservative and hold flat with the year before. I used actual revenue, not budget. Reserve funds provide a mechanism for legally saving money to finance future infrastructure, equipment, and any other requirements. They provide a degree of financial stability by reducing reliance on incurring debt to finance a project, and can also provide districts with a budgetary option that can help mitigate the need to cut any programs or services or to even raise taxes. This is a list of the reserve funds that our district currently has. The Employee Benefit Accrued Liability, is also known as the EBLA reserve, is used for the payment of accrued unused days upon an employee's retirement or termination. The Retirement Contribution Reserve is used for the payment of retirement contributions to the New York State Employee Retirement System, or ERS, and the TRS subfund is used for the payment of retirement contributions to the Teachers Retirement System, or TRS. The Workmen's Compensation Reserve is for the payment of compensation, benefits, medical, hospital, and any other expenses that are authorized by workmen's compensation law. The Unemployment Reserve is used to reimburse the State Unemployment Insurance Fund for payments made to claimants. And lastly, our Capital Reserve is for the payment for the cost of any capital projects or large equipment purchases. We also have to factor in our budget formula the use of any reserves. You may recall last year that we actually budgeted $1.3 million for the use of reserves, which was related to the threat of the state cutting state aid by 20%. Thankfully, again, that did not happen, so that use of reserves will most likely not be necessary this year. For 21-22, we are budgeting the use of $400,000 in reserves from both the ERS and TRS reserve funds. And again, if it's not necessary, you don't have to allocate from the reserve, but it is factored into our budget this year. The most common type of assigned fund balance is the appropriated fund balance. The Board of Education may use a portion of fund balance to help finance the following year's budget, which is referred to as appropriated fund balance. This is essentially the amount that's used to offset what we have to raise in taxes the following budget year. And we're not looking at any changes, we're looking to continue with $1 million. So this is a summary of our budget formula for the 21-22 school year as compared to the current year, and all the components that we just went through. And as you can see, the most important increase in changes are the projected tax levy increase of $1.4 million or 1.6%, and our budget to budget increase of $3.1 million or 2.49%. On the ballot this year in May, the first proposition you will see will be for the 21-22 school budget. The second proposition will be for the use of the capital reserve. And lastly, residents will also get to vote on the election of 2 Board of Education trustee seats. The Capital Reserve Fund was established and approved by the community during our May 2019 budget vote. Capital Reserve Funds allow a district to save money for future capital projects. Again, that would have had to have been funded through your annual budget or even through a bond. The best part of a capital reserve, of course, is that it comes at no additional cost to the taxpayer. It is funded through remaining surplus monies at year end. And as of last fiscal year end, which was June 30th, 2020, the capital reserve had a fund balance of $4,023,645. So this is the second proposition that we will be putting on the ballot this year. The use of our capital reserve of $1.6 million, well, close to $1.7 million. This is a list of the proposed projects. There are 7 projects in total, and district-wide, we would like to replace water fountains with water bottle filling stations. At Manatuck and Okonock, we will be installing air conditioning mini splits in the main office and the nurse's office. Just as a reminder, Bayview and Paul J. Blue did have these installed recently during bond work. The campus-style fencing at the high school along Montauk Highway and Higby Lane will be replaced. 4 restrooms in total will be renovated at the high school and Bayview. We will be replacing the auditorium stage curtains at the high school, and we will also be replacing the interior walk-in freezer and refrigerator at the high school. It's important to note here that upon completion of all of these projects, any unspent monies are always returned to the Capital Reserve Fund. This is a list of our important dates and on our budget timeline. Next Monday, April 19th, all nominating petitions for the board trustee seats are due to district office by 5 p.m. Next Tuesday is our budget adoption here at Beach Street Auditorium. On May 6th, we are having our public budget hearing. And of course, on May 18th is the budget vote and trustee election at the high school high school gymnasium from 7 a.m. through 9 p.m. Any questions?
I do not. But I just want to say, Elise, thank you. Thank you to your entire team, honestly, really outstanding work. But Elise, you're a superstar, and thank you very much. You know, that capital reserve fund, I believe, is something that you brought to us, and you saved quite a lot of money, and being able to do projects this way is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any questions?
Okay, yeah. If there's no questions about the budget, if I could ask if we could go into exec session?
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn to executive session where we may discuss negotiations, litigation, and personnel? So moved. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.